Madam President.
The senator from Kansas.
Thank you, Madam President. I ask unanimous consent that the pending amendment be set aside and that the Moran Amendment number 815 be made order of the day in the Senate.
Without objection, the clerk will report.
Senator from Kansas, Mr. Moran, proposes an amendment numbered 815 to amendment numbered 738 on page 6, line 17.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that the reading be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Madam President, thank you very much. The amendment that I'm offering today was one that I discussed in the Agriculture Appropriations Subcommittee. I'm a member of that subcommittee and am very interested in the topic of the appropriations for the Department of Agriculture. And this amendment would transfer $8 million from the department administrative account to the Watershed Rehabilitation Program. Watershed Rehabilitation Program is a bit broader than this, but basically what we're talking about here are PL 566 watershed structures. Across our country, more than 1,000 structures have been built over a long period of time, many of them up to 50 years old. These structures are built for purposes of flood control, for nutrient management, for conservation, wildlife habitat, for recreation. Clearly, these structures have had an important component of the economy and well-being of communities and people across America now for a long time. And in fact, according to the Natural Resources Conservation Service of the Department of Agriculture, these PL 566 structures provide agricultural benefits at their estimate of $404 million. These benefits are things like erosion control, animal waste management, water conservation, water quality improvement, irrigation efficiency, changes in land use, things like that. There's also non-agricultural benefits, which the NRCS estimates at $877 million in benefits. These are associated with recreation, fish and wildlife, rural water supply, water quality, municipal and industrial water supply, incidental recreation uses. And then there, of course, is the important, particularly as we look at what's happened in our country in this season, during this year, flood control. Agricultural flood control by NRCS estimates is a value of $320 million. Non-agricultural flood protection, $425 million. So we're talking about flood control structures that have benefited for a number of reasons, about $2 billion. This amendment does not create the opportunity to construct more of those structures. But the problem this amendment addresses is that those structures are aging, and as I said earlier, many of them are nearly 50 years old. In my view, it's very much like the analogy that we have with bridges. We've focused some attention over the last several years on deteriorating bridges and infrastructure in our highway system. And we know that if we don't provide the maintenance, the deterioration occurs, and ultimately we can have a catastrophe. And that's what I'm trying to address here, is my fear that in the absence of paying attention to the maintenance of these flood control structures, that we run the potential of having a disaster. Not only do the benefits accrue to agriculture and to communities and water supply and recreation, but the real thing here is about the loss of certainly property values, but more importantly, the loss of life. And so in the absence of maintaining these structures, we run the risk that the investment that we have made over decades begins to disappear, and not only do we lose the value of the asset, we potentially lose life by those who would be harmed by the flooding that will occur in the absence of these flood control measures. So therefore, a watershed rehabilitation program was created years ago. And the problem in the funding that we have today in the appropriation bill before us is there is no money, zero money in the bill to maintain these structures. And so ours is a very modest proposal to keep the program ongoing of transferring $8 million into that rehabilitation program to maintain those structures and prevent bad things from happening. And this is probably woefully inadequate in regard to the amount of resources that should be devoted to this. But looking at the bill and looking at the structure of the bill, how we've tried to find the right priorities and the balance within the Agricultural Appropriations Subcommittee and at the full Appropriations Committee, we concluded that we had the opportunity to at least put $8 million into the program. The Watershed Rehabilitation Program is administered by the Natural Resource and Conservation Service, and here's what it's described to do. It assists project sponsors with rehabilitation of aging project dams. Only dams installed under 566 and a couple of other programs are eligible. The purpose of this program is to extend the service life of dams and meet applicable safety and performance standards. Priority is given by NRCS to those structures that pose the highest risk to life and property, and projects are eligible when hazard to life and property increase due to downstream development and where there is a need for rehabilitation to extend the planned life of the structure. What that's saying is that in many of these instances where the structure has been built, now almost 50 years ago, communities have been built up downstream, and the dam becomes even more important to protect property and life for that development. And so we are here trying to make certain that there is a level of funding for repairing or replacing deteriorated components, repairing damage from catastrophic events such as the floods that we've experienced this year, and upgrading the structures to meet new dam safety laws or to even decommission a structure. I would guess that we are not going to fund new structures here in this Congress, in this fiscal environment, but we ought to at least take the responsibility of providing money to maintain the structures that are there. And it is important, in my view, that we do so. Unlike in past years, we can be assured that the money that we put into this bill will go to the highest priority projects, the dams that are in the most need of repair and maintenance. There is no opportunity for members of Congress under our rules here in the Senate to earmark these dollars, and so the USDA, the Department of Agriculture, through the Natural Resource and Conservation Service, will make those decisions. I know from my own state's case, and we're not one of the states that has the most dam structures, although it's an important aspect of maintaining water in its proper place and to provide wildlife habitat and conservation practices, improve the agricultural environment. Those structures are important to us, and we see it each and every day. In fact, just last month, in fact, for most of the time I've been in Congress, we do an annual, what I call, conservation tour, looking at the role that the Department of Agriculture, the private sector, wildlife and habitat organizations, how they partner and come together to make good things happen to improve our environment. And this year we focused on water quality and water quantity. And clearly this program of PL 566 structures are critical. And when I talk about that partnership, it would be important for members of the Senate to know that this program requires a 35% local match. So there is local money. The sponsors of these projects, these dams across our country, will have to find local resources in order to make that match. And so I would ask the Senate to give serious consideration. In fact, I would ask the Senate to approve the amendment I'm offering today. It is something that I, again, raised in our subcommittee and raised in our full committee with the hopes that we would be able to find a satisfactory offset. And from my view, the priority that we place on this program is one that is deserving of Senate support. And Madam President, I offer the amendment as I've described. Mr. President.
Senator from Kansas.
Mr. President, before yielding back our time,
Senate will be in order.
Mr. President, the pending business before the Senate is an amendment that I offered yesterday. It's Moran number 815. It has been agreed to that it will be accepted on voice vote, and I appreciate the leadership of Chairman Cole and Ranking Member Blunt, and I yield back the Republicans' time.
If there's no further debate.
If there's no further debate, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The amendment is agreed to.